to the energy department because the lab in which I grew up at Carnegie Mellon and the lab that my robots occupy now is a Department of Energy lab. It used to be the coal mining research. Carnegie Mellon is a long partner with the National Energy Technology Lab, so it's a great privilege for us to talk about energy and to talk about research. Thank you guys for coming out. I know spring break started an hour ago, so for those of you from Education City, this is a great honor that you would show up and honor our guests here today. One of the things that I've been thinking about this week for the students in the audience is what can you do with a PhD? Well, you can become a dean, or we had Vikram Pandit here, you can become the CEO of a financial services company in very troubled times, or you can become a professor and win a Nobel Prize and become a US Cabinet Secretary, or it turns out that you can become a US ambassador. It's my great privilege to welcome here, in order to introduce our keynote speaker, Ambassador Joseph LeBaron, Dr. Ambassador Joseph LeBaron, who has his PhD and whose very first job with the State Department was here in 1980. You can imagine the changes that he's seen in his career. He's been back and forth across North Africa and the Middle East. He has mastered what I believe to be two of the most difficult languages for an American to pick up, Turkish and Arabic. And we are now delighted to have him here as our ambassador and here to introduce our keynote speaker, Ambassador LeBaron.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here to welcome you to this lecture by one of America's most distinguished scientists, Secretary of Energy, Dr. Steven Chu. I'd like to thank Qatar Foundation, as well as the leadership and staff of Carnegie Mellon University, for organizing this event. In Cairo, last June, on the 4th, President Obama presented a new vision for relations between the United States and Muslim communities around the world. He called that vision a new beginning, and a major part of that new beginning focuses on expanding and deepening the engagement of the United States beyond issues of politics and political affairs, to include areas of shared interest that represent some of the finest, most advanced fields in the United States: science, technology, and research, and health, and education, to focus on such enduring existential problems such as food security in the Arab world. These new areas of engagement that I see getting underway as a result of President Obama's vision are reflected in another vision, that of Qatar's national vision of 2030. The vision states, and I quote, "In order to further support human development, Qatar will aspire to be an active center in the fields of scientific research and intellectual activity." These are two visions, one American, one Qatari, and in significant, fundamental ways, they overlap, they coincide, they are in synchronicity with one another. Imagine what we can accomplish together. And I can think of no one better from the United States to explore and to expand on this idea than our Nobel Prize laureate, the Secretary of Energy, Dr. Steven Chu. He was the co-recipient of the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1997. He was a professor of physics and molecular and cellular biology at the University of California. He held positions at Stanford University and at Bell Labs. Prior to becoming the Secretary of Energy, Dr. Chu led the Berkeley National Laboratory in its pursuit of new, alternative, and renewable energies. And now he is here with us, with you, in Qatar today to share his thoughts with us. So please welcome Dr. Steven Chu, the Secretary of Energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is indeed a pleasure to be here, to tour around this marvelous country, but also this marvelous, the Qatar Foundation. I got a quick glimpse of it just a moment ago. Very impressive. This conglomeration of universities here, it's University Park, or is that also very impressive. But I'm here today to talk about how innovation education can provide new energy solutions. First, let's talk a little bit about innovation. Some examples: Bell Laboratories invented the first silicon solar cell in 1954, and silicon still remains the leading type of, there's a hum here, the leading type of solar cell, although the other thin film technologies are quite competitive. The first transistor, the invention of the integrated circuit that has revolutionized electronics. The first laser in 1961, and in fact we're celebrating now throughout the year the 50th anniversary of the invention of the laser. And with the laser and with the electronics, of course, you have the internet, which has revolutionized the way information flows around the world. So the energy and climate challenge has many aspects to it. First, the global economy needs energy resources. It is intimately tied to the economic prosperity of the world today, but in the long-term future, it will be tied to the sustainable production and use of energy. And there are some risks of climate change I'm going to speak briefly about. And finally, there is this tension between the short run and the long run. Right now, we're in a worldwide recession. We need to get out of that recession. There is always a trade-off between today's generation and wealth creation today, and doing something that can protect the resources and the environment for future generations. And there's this natural tension, and how do you trade off those? So let me begin by reminding you of some measurements that have been made. The direct temperature measurements around the world, they actually go back to about 1860, but these are direct temperature measurements of an average around the world, and that blue line is just a time average. And what you see from this is that the temperature has its up and downs. It wiggles around a bit, but it is, in fact, increasing. Here, I'll do it this way. Now, if you took any 20-year period, no scientist would say in this 20-year period that that would be sufficient proof that the climate is changing, because after all, there have been other periods where it has cooled down temporarily. But over 150 years, and you look back even further, then you say, aha, there's something going on here. Now, you can ask, well, what is this due to? These are fluctuations, it's wobbling all over the place. Could it be due to the fact that the sun is changing its intensity? And the climate acceptors say it's the sun. It's nothing that has to do with humans. So let's talk about that, and let's look at some recent satellite measurements. And what you find is the solar radiation hitting the Earth has an 11-year cycle. It's well known. But over the last 3 cycles, the average energy hitting the Earth has been constant. But during that time, the temperature has gone up. And then the skeptics say, well, it's not the visible light, it's sunspots. And we maybe don't know anything about sunspots, but just because we don't know the mechanism doesn't mean it isn't due to sunspots. So it must be sunspots. So what about sunspots? Well, our satellites measure those too. So the sunspot intensity is in blue, the solar flares in green, the radio emissions in purple. They all show this 11-year cycle. So it's very tied to the yellow hash you see is the visible and infrared light. Again, the average intensity of the sunspots, the ions hitting the Earth, is the same. All right, so the intensity coming onto the Earth is the same. We don't have satellite data earlier than this, but there were other data that suggests it's also very similar. What about the concentration of greenhouse gases? So this is the present time over here, and you start looking backwards. So this is year 2000, looking back 1,000 years, and what you find is greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have increased. They were fairly flat, but starting around this period of time, something started to happen. Now, it happened to be coincident with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and the beginning of burning of coal. But there's further evidence. Again, it's evidence having to do with looking at the radioactive isotope carbon-14 relative to carbon-12, the normal isotope of carbon. And what happens is if you are a plant or an animal and you're a living, breathing thing and you take in the carbon-14 is made in the upper atmosphere due to cosmic rays. It mixes down to the lower atmosphere, and as, for example, a plant or the critters that ended up making the oil, what happens is as soon as that organism dies, it's no longer connected to the biosphere. And if it gets fossilized and goes under the ground for tens of millions of years, carbon-14 decays away to nothing. The half-life of carbon-14 is 5,700 years. So in over millions of years or tens of millions of years, there's no more radioactivity in the carbon. You take that carbon out of the ground, burn it, form carbon dioxide, you're putting up a form of carbon that has no additional radioactive carbon, and it mixes with the equilibrium of steady state making of the carbon-14 with the normal carbon. And so what happens is we see that the amount of carbon-14 in the world is going down due to the dilution of the carbon-12. So it's not just a coincidence. It has a real stamp that says this carbon came from the Earth and it no longer is radioactive. Okay? It's more than the smoking gun. It's kind of like you just heard the bang, the gunshot, everything. Now, then you say, well, still, how do you know the carbon hasn't changed over the millennia going backward? And indeed, it has changed. And this is now 2008, going backward in time. What you find is that the carbon dioxide has gone down, it's gone up, it's gone down, and coincident with the rise and fall of carbon dioxide during this period of time, 800,000 years ago, the temperature of the Earth changed. And clearly, around here, for example, in this last of the ice ages, humans were not responsible for any of this climate change, right? So where are we today? Well, we're here. So we've gone off the scale in the last 800,000 years, and in fact, we believe we've gone off the scale in the last 2 million years. This is a significant change since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased by 40%, and if you include the methane and nitrous oxides, it's over 50%. In a good scenario where the world wakes up to the dangers, we might be over here, let's say at 500 down here, 550 parts per million, 450 is down here. It's still off scale, and in a scenario where we completely ignore this, one scenario says it could go as high as 900. So here's the situation. Energy coming in, constant. Greenhouse gas layer effect. So heat energy going out is reduced. So what's going to happen? Well, it might heat up. What would prevent it from heating up? If the Earth responded so that whatever happened, it exactly negated more heat coming in, less heat coming out. Now, in actual fact, the Earth has responded, and it has gobbled up half of the carbon dioxide that humans have put out there. So this is good news. We only see half the damage. The bad news is we haven't seen the full extent because the surface of the ocean warms up, but there's a very slow mixing of the heat from the surface of the ocean and the deep ocean where it's a lot colder. Until the deep ocean warms up so that the surface, so there's something cold down there sucking out the heat, and until the cold ocean warms up and you reach a new equilibrium, the heat escaping will not match the heat coming in. Therefore, there's going to be a time delay. What's the length of that time delay? Well, about 100 years, 150 years. So the full effect of what we've already done from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to today will not be seen for over 100 years. So if you say, let's wait to be sure, it will be too late. You've just set in place, and it's something I think you all can understand. You know, heat coming in, heat going out, it's not matched. The details of that, we don't fully understand. But the general shape of what's coming on, we think we're worried about. So what are some of the effects? There are many, many effects. There's changes in water patterns that have been predicted, but let's talk about measurements that we actually can see. Again, I'm talking about real data. This is Greenland, and there's ice in Greenland. It's 2 kilometers thick. We're worried about Greenland ice pack melting. If the Greenland ice pack melts, there will be a 7-meter rise in sea level around the world. Well, this will actually affect Qatar because 7 meters means all those LNG plants, LNG ports go underwater. All the ports go underwater. Many of the airports of the world go underwater, and a lot of cities. So this is the issue. So is Greenland melting? So what we've done is we put up 2 satellites indicated here schematically. This is actually what they look like. And they go around the globe, and they measured, here's a satellite and here's a satellite. And as they circle the globe, they very precisely measure the distance between these 2 satellites. If there's a change in gravity due to a higher density, let's say bigger mass, these satellites' orbit changes and their distance between them changes. And so by simply measuring their altitude and the distance between them very, very precisely to millimeters using high-frequency radar and some GPS as to confirm, what they have found is you can measure changes in mass very accurately. So here's a change in mass over Greenland. You actually see the ice pack diminishing. It's not only getting smaller, even though the snows in Greenland are increasing because in a warmer climate there's more evaporation. You actually have more snow. The ice pack is thinning. It's not only thinning, it's accelerating in its thinning. This parabolic trajectory has actually been going on since there have been careful measurements of this back 20 years, but now with the satellite data, it's so good that you can actually see the difference between high mass, high ice, winter, low mass, summer. So you can actually see summer-winter variations. Okay? This is data. So when people say Greenland's not really melting, that's a statement of wishful thinking. So what if we follow a business-as-usual path? What do climate models predict? Now, the climate models, I said, are not, there are some uncertainties in large uncertainties, and it really depends on what scenarios you take. But even if you pick a particular scenario, there are still large uncertainties. And it varies. If we continue on a business-as-usual path, the Earth can warm up by 2.5 degrees centigrade. It can warm up by over 6 degrees centigrade. Huge uncertainty there. Those bumps and wiggles that I showed you in that first graph, we don't understand over these 10-year, 15-year cycles what those bumps and wiggles, what was really causing, because it's a very complex mixing between that very weak solar cycle and changes in the ocean currents. There's a feeling that it's the ocean currents that are doing a lot of the 10-year, 15-year stuff. All right. Now, what we've warmed up since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution by about 0.8 degrees centigrade. There's about another half degree, 1 degree left if we do nothing. That is, if we emit no more carbon in the atmosphere starting today. Let's talk about something 5 or 6 degrees. If we go 5 or 6 degrees, and some business-as-usual scenarios say that there's probably a 50% probability we will go over 4.5 degrees. At 5 or 6 degrees, I picked that because if you looked at the ice ages, the last of the ice ages, where the United States, all of Canada and the United States down to Ohio, Pennsylvania, maybe a third of the way down in the United States, was covered year-round in ice. So think about that. 6 degrees makes a very profound change in the climate of the world. Okay? So if you go 5 degrees the opposite direction, you will see an equally profound change. There will be places which are fertile land that become deserts. The rain patterns change. There will be more precipitation. The models are predicting in the United States, again, we don't know for sure, but they're suggesting that the precipitation comes more in downpours, less in light rain. Unfortunately, it comes in the winter and in early spring, much less in the summer and the late spring when you want it for your agriculture. And so when people say, oh, Washington, D.C. just got a record amount of snow this last year, which we did, it's a century record, proof that it isn't changing. No, it's neither proof that the climate's changing or not changing. It's just one year. It's an event. It's a weather thing. But it is consistent with the fact that you get more snow. But never mind that. So I do stress there's an uncertainty, but I also stress that if you're going to bet and say, would you tolerate a 40% chance that the Earth might go as dramatic a change in the climate of the Earth in 100 years, not in millennia, and such a drastic change, and so these are your grandchildren, that they would have to adapt, and it's very hard to adapt to such a dramatic change. Would you want to do that? And that's the issue here. And certainly sea level changes, 1, 2, 3 meters, lots of places around the seacoast begin to go underwater in the United States, 4 feet, a little over a meter, meter and a quarter, and a lot of cities go underwater like New Orleans. I think if these things do happen, the most serious first issue will be that there will be a lot of water stress around the world. In these areas in dark brown, they're predicting very high water stress. It's very high water stress due to the fact that the summers are hotter and it's more evaporation. The rain might not come at the right time, and it shifts. And so the whole western part of the United States goes under severe water stress. In fact, the whole western part of the United States is beginning to go under water stress in the last couple of decades, but it's accelerating. The other thing is that many of the trees are exposed not by the higher temperatures, but for example, in the Rocky Mountains and in British Columbia, all our pine trees are beginning to die because the pine beetle is no longer killed by the frosts. And so the population goes out of control. And in British Columbia, about 40% of their pine is now dead. And they're predicting about 80% will go. I was talking to the governor of Colorado a week ago, and he said 30-40% of their pine is now dead. It's dead standing pine, and he's looking around and says, can we turn this into a high-value product rather than just burning it? But now, what's the danger about dead forests? Well, when there are denuded forests, there is no forest. When it rains, the water comes and washes down the hills. I mean, part of the watershed is trees. So that also leads to the water stress. So we are on an unsustainable energy path, and we have to work together to find these solutions. Okay, what's the role of natural gas? Well, actually, natural gas has a role. As you know, Qatar is the largest exporter of natural gas. This is old data, 2007, but it certainly dominates the world. Why does natural gas have a role? Well, if you burn natural gas to make electricity, it emits half the carbon dioxide as coal and less than fuel oil, and the total life cycle is even less than that because there's a lot of carbon emission in the refining of fuel oil. It's better than that because if you look at, for example, the NOx and SOx between, so this is the sulfur dioxide in orange, the nitrogen oxides in blue. This is coal, fuel oil, natural gas. So it's a much cleaner burning fuel, very much less particulate matter, virtually no sulfur, virtually no mercury. Essentially, well, no, I'll go on a limb, I'll say no mercury. And so it's a much cleaner fuel. It's actually going to be used as a transition fuel as we go to more renewables. And the reason is that these are examples when the sun stops shining, clouds roll by and it gets cloudy, or this is an example when the wind stops blowing. It stopped blowing. This is in the Bonneville Power Administration, the Pacific Northwest. It stopped blowing for 11 days. When the sun stops shining and the wind stutters or stops blowing, in order to avoid a blackout, you have to bring online very, very quickly other resources. If you're only 5% renewables, it doesn't matter. It's just a little dimple. But imagine going to 30%, 40%, 50% renewables. All of a sudden, this matters a great deal. Now, when you do that, the fastest response time of a big utility scale energy is hydro. You just open the gate and within a second or so, you begin to generate electricity from a hydro dam. But not everywhere in the world has hydroelectricity. Okay? The second fastest is natural gas. You cannot ramp up a coal plant, and you certainly cannot ramp up a nuclear plant. Okay? If you ramped up and down a coal plant, you'll just prematurely wear this thing out. And so natural gas can come up within 3 hours, but otherwise, so natural gas is a transition fuel in that respect. It turns on very rapidly as a backup. It also has the potential for energy storage, large-scale energy storage. Suppose you have solar or wind. Department of Energy and other places are looking into the use of that electricity to pump air into a cavern that's sealed. That compressed air then could be released. You then use natural gas to boost it, and so you're using the compressed air to help spin the turbine, and you're using the natural gas to give a little boost to it. So it's a hybrid mixture, but the effective energy storage of a variable source of energy down to compressed air back into electricity generation is about 70% efficient round-trip efficiency, which is the same as actually a sulfur-ion battery, except it's much, much larger volume, much less expensive. And so again, natural gas plays a role in this. Now, the worldwide use of gas is projected to grow significantly, mostly in the non-OECD countries. But I also want to emphasize that in the first industrial revolution, it created wealth by not taking wealth from someone else. It created wealth by actually technology. If you consider if you were a king before the Industrial Revolution, some very rich person, your wealth was measured in how many servants and animals you had, because it was human power and it was animal power that actually gave you your standard of living in a certain sense. All of a sudden, what we have today, by using fossil fuel, we have much, much more energy and power available to us. And in the United States, for example, that uses energy in a very heavy way. And if you consider an adult human being and how much food do they have to eat, it's 2,500 calories. If you eat 3,000 calories, unless you're an athlete, you're going to grow in a way you might not want to. If you eat less than 1,800 calories, you're going to shrink. 2,500 calories is a pretty healthy diet, and you can do a lot of work. Let's convert that amount of energy input in human beings to the average amount of power we use in America today 24/7. It turns out that every man, woman, and child in the United States has the equivalent of 100 servants. This is part of why we enjoy such a high standard of living. Now, so then you might say, oh, in that case, prosperity is directly proportional to the amount of carbon emissions because it's directly proportional to the amount of energy you use. And most of our energy right now is coming from fossil fuel. Well, I say, no, there's no law of physics that says prosperity is proportional to carbon emissions. So here's an example of what I mean by that. Each of these dots is a particular country. And on the y-axis are plotted the Human Development Index. The Human Development Index measures three things. It measures GDP per capita in a country. It measures the health care of a country, the mortality, what's the average age where people, how long do they live, and it measures the education. And what you see is if you're very, very poor, using more energy is directly tied to the use of energy. More energy means, more access to energy means greater prosperity, without a doubt. If you're extremely poor, that's true. You get up to here, and it begins to plateau. There's a little dip over here because if you're very energy rich, you aren't as abstemious about using energy. But let's just say that these countries over here, for example, I don't know where the United States is. I think it's around here. What we'd like to do in the United States is bring our energy down. We think we can bring it down by at least a factor of 2. But we can bring our carbon emission down by, we want to bring it down mid-century by a factor of 5, by 80% or more. Why do developed countries need to do this? For the simple fact that we don't have a monopoly on prosperity, and we need to give headroom for these developing countries to come up. Because down here, you do need more access to energy. Okay. So the takeaway message is, beyond a certain prosperity, it kind of bottoms out. You don't need more energy. And as we drive to more efficiency, this is a good thing. But countries with a high education levels have high per capita GDP. So here's the education index. This is just the GDP. And if you have a low education index, you are a nation that on average is impoverished, but as the education grows, you have great wealth. And that is one of the lessons, again, universally among cultures and all around the world, is high education means greater prosperity. Now, it's mentioned President Obama's Cairo speech, and he said in that speech it was innovation in the Muslim communities that developed the order of algebra, our magnetic compass, tools of navigation, our mastery of pens and printing, our understanding of how disease spreads and how it can be healed. And so that intellectual capacity and ability is something which the Qatar Foundation is wanting to harness to prepare the people of Qatar and the region to meet the challenges of an ever-changing world. And so this is the goal, is that you want to diversify the wealth creation, and in the end, the gas will eventually run out. And this is certainly appreciated. Now, in the Department of Energy, it's not the usual Ministry of Energies in the rest of the world. The usual Ministry of Energies are focused on oil and gas. We're a little different. We have that domain, but it started historically from the Manhattan Project, and because of that, it was started historically as a science-based agency. And I'm very proud to say that the Department of Energy is the biggest funder of the physical sciences in the United States, significantly more than the National Science Foundation. It has funded the work of more Nobel Prize winners than any other science funding agency in the world, over 100. It has helped educate young scientists, graduate students, postdocs, young career scientists, dozens and dozens who have gone on to get Nobel Prizes. That's a little bit murky. I don't know what the full count is, but as director of Lawrence Berkeley Lab, where I was director, I looked back and looked in chemistry, biology, medicine, and looked at all the people, when they write these little biographies, where were they, where did they go to school? It turned out Lawrence Berkeley Lab helped educate 30 young scientists who went on to get Nobel Prizes. And I was included. I was an employee of Lawrence Berkeley Lab as well as a graduate student of University of California. So this is a remarkable achievement. We have, and Lawrence Berkeley Lab had 3% of the membership of the National Academy of Sciences when I was there as director. It's a staggering collection of intellectual horsepower. And so these national labs are a great asset to the nation and to the world. President Obama has said that his American Recovery and Reinvestment Act is making an $80 billion down payment on a clean energy economy with $8 billion in innovation. Well, what are the things that we can do? We're driving towards higher efficiency. This graph in the blue is the energy usage of United States refrigerators. Beginning in California, they said you can't build a refrigerator unless it meets a certain minimum standard. It was eventually adopted in 1993 by the Department of Energy. It became a national standard. During this time, even though the size of refrigerators went up, the energy used per refrigerator went down by more than 75%. The inflation-adjusted cost of refrigerators went down by a factor of 2. Why? Because the most expensive thing in a refrigerator is the compressor. With better insulation, better designs, you can make a smaller compressor. Okay? So this is where you can have your cake, you can eat it too, you can use less electricity, you can save money, all these good things. How much energy has an efficient refrigerator? Oh, by the way, the best refrigerators are 50% less energy usage. Okay, so it can even be better. This is the American average. Incredible, if we were using today, if we were using 1975 refrigerator efficiency today, we would be using more electricity today than all the renewable energy in the form of wind, solar thermal, solar photovoltaic generated in the United States. It's about 4%. So commercial and residential refrigerators use an incredible amount of electricity. If you have a very efficient air conditioner, the air conditioning has gone up by more than a factor of 2 in efficiency. Similarly, this is just money wasted. So you want the most efficient appliances, the most efficient buildings, the most efficient residences you can possibly have. Now, with the right government policies, we think that science can come to the aid in the future. I've told you about technologies we now have today, but let me give you an example of how technologies have transformed the world. In 1960, the world population was 3 billion people, and in 1968, there was a best-selling book written by a Stanford professor that predicted, despite any mass feeding programs, because of the rapidly growing populations in South Asia in particular, it was projected that there would be massive starvation. Now, in 1970, a fellow by the name of Norman Borlaug got a Nobel Prize in Peace. And why did he get this Nobel Prize? He took many strains of wheat and crossbred them so that he created a dwarf strain of wheat that was disease-resistant, but it was also, it could tolerate higher levels of fertilizer, and it could yield higher wheat per acre. And it was tried in Mexico, it was tried in India, it was tried in Pakistan, and the amount of wheat from these dwarf strains of wheat per acre increased 3 to 5-fold, depending on where you were. So all of a sudden, the same part of land, 4 times more wheat, same size farm, same farm, okay? So all of a sudden, you can feed more people. Miraculously, and there have been equal improvements. The corn yield in the United States from 1930 to today has gone up 7-fold per acre. So what has happened is the amount of land put under agricultural production has remained flat, while the population has more than doubled, and these red and blue curves are the grain production in the world. Okay? That completely transformed our choices. In fact, the same thing happened going from the 19th to the 20th century. Europe was facing a crisis of depleted soil, again, mass starvation, and chemists, 2 German chemists, invented a way of pulling nitrogen out of the air and turning nitrogen into ammonia. And from ammonia, you can make nitrogen-based fertilizer. And when you can make nitrogen-based fertilizer, all of a sudden, you can replenish the depleted soils of Europe. That was deemed so important that Fritz Haber got a Nobel Prize, and Karl Bosch took the Haber process and went to higher pressures and made it much more efficient, and you could mass produce this fertilizer. He got a separate Nobel Prize for the same thing. And the Nobel Prize Committee doesn't give 2 Nobel Prizes for the same thing unless it's really important. Because if they made a mistake, they're not going to admit it. No, they don't make mistakes. But in any case, or at least not in my case. No, at least, so it was deemed, in fact, there were 2.5 Nobel Prizes given because in 2007, there was a Nobel Prize given for catalytic chemistry, And in this Nobel Prize, it specifically cited, at last we begin to understand on a detailed chemical view the Haber-Bosch process. Okay, it's amazing. Now, what are some of the other things we can do? We can design buildings in a much more efficient way. Consider the way we design a building today. You go and you ask people, well, what do they want? And then you make a detailed design, and then you begin to instruct it, and then your budget looks a little bit, and we got to do some of these changes because we can't afford all the things that they put in the drawings, and that's called value engineering. And you do all these things. Sometimes the architects and structural engineers know about all the latest things you can incorporate into the building for energy saving. Sometimes, many times they don't. So let's consider the way we design airplanes now. You can make a design, you make any change, you can actually know how it will affect the performance of the airplane. You will actually know how it will affect the energy efficiency of the airplane. And so whatever happens, this is all in the software of this thing. And remarkably, in the design of the airplane, we know so much about airplanes today that you can actually make a simulator that will mimic the characteristics of the airplane before you've even built it and before you've actually gone and test flown it. And I remember one high-performance jet plane the United States built. The pilot took it out, and after some days of flying it, he said, how does it feel? What did it fly like? And he said, it's really well. It flew exactly like the simulator. Okay? Now, you can do more than that. So these computer designs, these computer-aided designs, allow you to put in all the latest energy efficiency into it, telling you how to handle the ducts and how to do all those other things to take advantage of what we know today. But consider the operation of the building. When buildings are made, a very small fraction of them are what are called commissioned. So long before you move in the people, what you do is you turn the building on, you turn on the heating, air conditioning systems, and you tune it up so that, the building, this room's not too cold, that room's not too hot. That commissioning is very important because it saves 10–20% of the energy consumption of building, just tuning up the building. After 20–30 years, they get out of tune for a variety of reasons. They simply get out of tune, like in old days, the cars get out of tune. But also, they get out of tune because you move stuff around, and you move copy machines and computers and this and that, and you misbalance the building. So you have to recommission, okay? But with a computer-operated building with sensors, you can continuously divert the heating and cooling where you want it to be. You can have very inexpensive, using infrared sensors that cost $1 or less, sense where the people are from the carbon dioxide. And so, the people are in this auditorium, you put ventilation in this auditorium, and so on and so forth. The people not in this room, you can turn down the ventilation of that room. You can do many, many things. The sun is going over the building, the sun is beating down here. You have shades automatically block the sunlight from heating up the building during a hot summer day, when you open up in the wintertime. All these things can be continuously operated. It's very much like today's modern cars, which are constantly tuning up the engine. They sense the oxygen, the temperature, the air pressure, the throttle position. They tell you how much fuel to inject. They get 20% more power out of the same size engine because this is constantly in tune. But with a building, you can do much better than that. So this is, again, something we think is possible. Silicon has great capability. Qatar has a lot of sun. Beginning in this chart in 1980, as time went on, as you deployed more and more solar technology, there are small incremental improvements that were continuous, and in this crystalline silicon curve, you see the price going down. This is a logarithmic curve, so it starts at greater than $20 per installed watt down to 2009, where we're down below $2 a watt, and many of the solar companies are now saying a particular solar module, the price can go to perhaps $1 or less an installed watt. Okay? Now, the price today in the United States, if you're putting out in a big solar farm, it's about $4 an installed watt, the whole thing. the module, the electronics, the mounting system, the installation costs. Whether it's going to be crystalline silicon, polycrystalline silicon, thin film, other material technologies, we don't know what's going to win, but there's a confidence now that within the end of this year, it'll be about $1 a module, $1 installed module or less. When it becomes $1 a watt, all the rest of the stuff becomes the majority of the cost. What's the rest of the stuff? This is called balance of system cost. It's the inverters and converters. The inverters and converters don't even last as long. They last half the time of a silicon photocell. There's a significant price drop there. The mechanical installation, the thinner the films, the lighter you make it, the less you need on this. The electrical installation, the project cost and everything. So we're looking at how, ideally we'd like to make microinverters on the modules themselves and that could withstand the sun. And if you do that, a lot of things happen. So we hope that the price of solar can go down below $2 a watt fully installed. If it goes down to $1 a watt fully installed, then everybody will put it on the roof and won't even think about it, because it will become that much better. Here's another thing that we're looking at the Department of Energy that's near and dear to people in this country. It has to do with desalinization. This is what's called a carbon nanotube. Each of these red circles is a single carbon atom. And what happens is if you take this carbon and you just puff it up, let's say, with a laser, and you put it in the right conditions, the carbon then comes together remarkably in this form of a single sheet of graphite, single layer of carbon that's rolled up. And this little tube, if you just count the distance from here, this is 2 atom diameter distances from one carbon atom to another carbon atom. So it's maybe a dozen, maybe 20, say a dozen atom diameters, 20 atom diameters of a little tube. And so if you take these little tubes, and these have remarkable properties. Some of these tubes, if their structure is right, are metallic, and they can conduct a very extremely low resistance, bordering on superconductivity, or they can be perfect insulators, or they can be made into semiconductors. But for this, we just look at the physical property. It is a small tube that can pass water. And it is a small tube that potentially can pass water and not salts. So one of the things that people are investigating is, can you make a membrane? This stuff is very cheap to make, okay? Don't think of little people carefully putting little carbon atoms. You can make it a kind of a blast furnace sort of thing. The round version of this structure, called a buckyball, got a Nobel Prize. The cylindrical version of this structure may get a Nobel Prize. There's a cylindrical version and there's a single sheet version called graphene. Those two things could combine for another Nobel Prize. We'll see. But in any case, the idea is you have some microporous support on this, and the water goes through, the salts don't. The hope is, at a laboratory scale, but can you make the membrane at large surface area? But the hope is that it will require 30 to 50% less energy in reverse osmosis, again, using these radically new technologies. Here's a final, I don't know, there's one or two other technologies. If you consider the way you refine aluminum from the ore, what you do is you take the ore, you put it in a solution, and and then you pass a tremendous amount of current in the solution. So in the solution, which has the aluminum, it's called in a so-called liquid electrolyte, you have a positive terminal and a negative terminal, and the metal comes out of solution, plates out of solid, pure aluminum, and you're releasing a lot of carbon dioxide and other things. So an engineer, an inventor at MIT said, this uses a lot of energy. And certainly it can't be a battery because the carbon dioxide just leaves and goes away. But if you can substitute this, and suppose instead of carbon dioxide bubbling out, there's another metal. And so in his dream, you have one metal in yellow and another metal in blue, and you have this solution, this electrolyte, of the mixture of these two metals, and then you pass a tremendous amount of current. And just as you're plating out the aluminum, you're plating out one metal, this happens to be antimony, and you plate out another metal, this happens to be magnesium. It's a liquid, but because the density is different, think of this big swimming pool, and they're separated just by gravity. And you pass more and more current through, and you get more and more solid metal, less of this electrolyte. Then it's fully charged. Then what do? You hook up your building, your city to this thing, and it discharges. Now, what's the advantage of this? Because it's a liquid interface, it's self-healing. Because it certainly scales up. You know, these battery-powered cars and lithium-ion batteries, the actual lithium-ion cells, or the individual cells, are not very big. They're the kind of fist size or even smaller. You know, the things in this battery, this is, I think, a 6-cell lithium-ion battery. The Tesla automobile, an all-electric automobile, takes Sony computer batteries and packages them into this big mother. Each individual thing is still a little cell. So this is not very cost-effective. It doesn't scale to large scale. You can make a swimming pool out of this, and it will scale right. So the hope is that we can reduce the cost of large-scale batteries by a factor of 10. And if that happens, all of a sudden renewables become a very big deal because you can store power. This will be your flywheel for other sources, other things. So we'll see. So let me just finish by saying that very famous picture I'm quite fond of. It's called Earthrise. Apollo mission, the first mission that went around to the far side of the moon and orbited the moon. In the last of those orbits, they turned the capsule earthward, and they saw this picture of a beautiful Earth rising from the horizon of the moon. Now, I want you to notice a few things. This is not a good place to live, the moon. This looks pretty good, okay? And guess what? Nowhere else to go. So what the astronaut who took this picture said, we came all this way to explore the moon. And the most important thing is we've discovered the Earth. Since 1968, we've discovered that humans are altering the destiny of the Earth. Among scientists who've looked at all the data, this is not controversial. We don't know exactly what will happen, but we are altering the destiny of the Earth. And it takes a long time to change the way we do things. Why? It's simply because the energy infrastructure takes a long time. If you build a power plant, it's an investment of billions of dollars that lasts 60 years. You build infrastructure for taking gas and oil out of the ground. That's hundreds of billions of dollars investment. You made that investment, you're going to use it. So we have a long time. You think we have a long time, we don't. But if you look at where we need to go in order, remember, all that carbon dioxide is still mounting up, and the full effects won't be seen for 100 years. So I leave you with this quote from Martin Luther King. It was in 1967. He was not talking about climate change. He was talking about the war in Vietnam. And he came out and said, we have to end this war. And in this speech, he said, we are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We're confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. And this is also true of our current energy and climate challenge. And together, we've got to work together to fix it so that there is a world for our children and our grandchildren. And oh, by the way, it will create a prosperous world. People say it will cost, and this is the only thing. No, this is a new industry. This is a creation of new stuff, okay? Just like the first industrial revolution. So it will give us cleaner energy. No one is saying stop using energy. We just want it in a cleaner form, and we want to use it as efficiently as possible. And with that, I thank you.
You have just had a graduate level seminar on physics and energy policy. There will be a quiz. But before the quiz, Secretary Professor Chu has offered to take some questions from the audience. Do some of you have questions? In fact, let me take the prerogative of asking the first one. You didn't mention methanol. Is that a good idea or is that an impractical idea?
No, I think there's a real possibility in methanol, and we are beginning to look very hard at, you can take biomass, you can take methane, you can take coal, you gasify it, you make syngas, you can turn, and there's a process where you turn it into methanol. From methanol, you can make a very clean liquid transportation fuel. During this process, in the gasification process, you have to take the carbon dioxide and sequester it. If you do that, it's a relatively new process that was invented by ExxonMobil. The life cycle cost of turning coal to a very high quality fuel, liquid fuel, is actually less than the life cycle process of just drilling oil and refining it. Now, here's the good news. That's 7% less, so it's about the same. And gas liquid, if you take a lot of the carbon out, you're going to do better. Now, if you begin to mix biomass in with this, like bio-waste, it gets to be very exciting. Because here's this plant sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. You blend that in, and with coal, it turns out with gas it will even be better. You gasify the biomass material with the fossil carbon. You take the excess carbon dioxide, you stick that in the ground, you have a transportation fuel. When the airplane or the car or the ship burns it, of course, it's going to emit the carbon dioxide. Tailpipe capture is very hard. But because the plant has sucked out the carbon dioxide, by the time you're 40% biomaterial, you're now carbon neutral life cycle cost. That's good. You've just gone, and 20%, you're 76 below life cycle costs in carbon. So you can have so a blend of fossil inputs and bio inputs means you have a clean source of energy. So again, I'm trying to get people away from thinking, we can't use fossil fuel anymore. What's going to happen to the countries that produce fossil fuel? What's going to happen to the countries that produce coal? No, we want to use newer ways of doing this. Cost is everything. And so it's a matter of, can you get it? Now, so that's the big thing, but it's not a crazy pipe dream. There are other things you can do. What's going to pay for the cost of capturing the carbon and using fossil fuel? Well, if you can also gasify and make high-value chemical products. And so, for example, your electricity generation in this country, you use it during summer, it's half unused during the winter. You can be using that if you design the plant correctly. You can actually use it to make high-value chemical products. So you get a full return on the investment of your plant, which allows you to, with that money saved, can pay for some of the sequestration. Okay? So there's a lot of things now on the table. But the methanol, George Olah, one of my colleagues in chemistry, a Nobel laureate, is a big fan of the methanol economy, as you probably know. So, okay,
So we just added an economics lecture into the others. I had a question here, please.
In solar energy, and I think if this would be fully developed, we could reach that goal of making it less than $1 per hour per watt. Having 2 kilowatts per square meter is something which not many countries have, but here in Qatar the sun shines most of the year, all the time.
Well, thank you for that question.
Well, yes. You can use solar for heating water. You can use solar for electricity. They both work, but there are things that you want electricity for that heating water doesn't do, like running this thing. And so I think both are. You want to think of all those applications.
Another question further back in the white shirt.
This is more of a policy question, but cap and trade right now is something that's being floated as a possibility to reduce carbon dioxide consumption. And there's been several studies looking at systems in Great Britain, for example, that show, that cap and trade does work in reducing carbon dioxide, but it kind of shifts the reductions to someplace with a lower labor cost. Would you agree with that, I guess, as a policy for the United States? And I mean, if that is true, is that still an acceptable outcome for that policy?
By saying cap and trade does a lower lead cost, say that again? For example, well, I personally think if we put a cap on carbon, first, the administration does want a cap on carbon and a trading system, probably with brackets so that you confine it, allow it to grow slowly, but you send a long-term signal that says the price of carbon will be higher over a 50-year period. We believe that's very important because if you're building, for example, a power plant, you are making a 60-year investment. If you know the price is going to be 30 years, 40 years from today, a certain price, that will guide your decision. Now, to what will it do? Well, the initial thing it will probably do is it will begin to favor gas and nuclear over coal plants until we develop a technology that captures and sequesters the coal economically, to be competitive. Now, eventually, you want to capture the CO2 from the gas plant as well, but you get a factor 2 right off the bat by shifting to natural gas, and it will favor nuclear. It will begin to favor renewables, but renewables are still expensive. Again, this is something in technology. We're looking for better choices for renewables. But the other thing is, again, I mentioned this briefly, once you go above 30% renewables, you have a transmission and you have a storage problem. And so again, that's why we're looking at all these other things for the storage, and then you need a very smart grid, because all of a sudden with these renewables, you have to manage two-way flows at a very fast time constant. So it's, it's seconds to avoid blackouts. And so that means a very highly automated, very smart system that can manage these two-way flows. So 5%, 10% renewables, no problem. 30%, 40%, 50%, big problem. So again, you have to concurrently develop those technologies.
Let me take two more questions, and the Secretary has been very generous with time. I get accused of only calling on men. Are there women who have questions? Women think of, there we go, thank you. And someone from this side. I get double diversity credits.
What's wrong with this side?
No one over here is asking.
Thanks very much for your talk. I'm wondering, would you like to see oil prices remain high to support an alternative energy agenda? And what price would be ideal for the U.S., or what price would hamper recovery?
No, look, the market will set the price of oil, and so I'm going to just say that, it is what it's going to be, but what we need to do is make oil is very valuable as a transportation fuel. And because of that, I see in the United States, most of it, aside from a small amount in plastics and petrochemicals, most of it is being used exclusively for transportation fuel because it's such high energy density. And so in our effort to decarbonize oil, we use biofuels and things like that. This is this is going to be the hardest thing to decarbonize, in my opinion. But as far as the price is concerned, we just let the free market take care of itself and let things happen. What we do want is a very transparent system, because with more information, more transparency, it will take some of the price swings out. And what we definitely don't want are wild price swings. It's hard to plan a business, it's hard to plan an economy that way.
And if you're in Qatar, it's hard to plan the national budget when there are those swings. Last question, is there someone toward the back who I have not called on? Please. Why don't you wait a second for the microphone?
Yeah, we're having trouble hearing you down here.
My question relates to your comment about the need to reduce emissions. Now, this is a problem that the world hasn't been able to agree upon. What do you think is the way to move forward without a global agreement on reducing emissions?
Well, I think we still want to work towards a global agreement, for sure. But in the meantime, and I hope that global agreement can be arrived at, in the next several years, but in the meantime, all the countries are looking to themselves. The United States is looking to itself and say, what can we do to reduce our carbon emissions? We hope there's a world agreement, but the United States is very focused. I mean, a lot of the Recovery Act money was spent, tens of billions of dollars is spent on reducing carbon emissions. If you look at a country like China, a developing country, but a developing country, the premier of China told me about 6 months ago that if we continue our path, climate change would be disastrous to China and the rest of the world. Our growth in carbon emissions is completely unsustainable, and we are going to work hard to diversify and clean up our energy supply and work hard on energy efficiency. And so they're building nuclear reactors. They're investing $88 billion in the highest voltage transmission lines in the world, 1,000,000 volts AC line, 800 kilovolt line that can send electricity over 1,900 kilometers, lose only 5–7% of the energy. These things cost a lot of money, but they want to green their energy production. They're investing heavily in solar and wind, but they also see an opportunity. And that is, they want to be the leader in this new industrial revolution, this green industrial revolution. And that they say, yes, we're going to do it because we don't want, if the Tibetan glacier melts by the end of this century or 150 years from now, we don't know exactly when, but that slow trickle of water that supplies over a quarter of the water of the world. Well, all of a sudden, in a rainy season, you get a flood, and in a dry season, you don't get anything. That's disastrous. And already the Yellow River is beginning to run dry. So they begin to see these effects, but they also see the opportunity. And in the United States, I hope the United States wakes up and sees the economic opportunity to lead in this new industrial revolution, or at least to be a leader in it. And so right now we've got to get going. Now, but we also need, I think, an agreement. But the attitude, we're not going to do anything until there's an agreement. And once the agreement is done, problem solved, right? No. Your rubber hits the road by reducing the emissions, developing the technologies, getting them deployed, and that's what really counts.
Thank you to the audience for coming and for your wonderful questions. Thank you to the Secretary for the lecture. Thank you for gracing Carnegie Mellon and the Qatar Foundation with your presence. Thank you especially for your leadership on this very important problem.